special edition of Pearls of Liberty. There's a topic that we've been discussing a little bit between ourselves, and it's not news, it is perspective. So we didn't want to include it in our regular video, but we do want to just kind of throw it out there for you to think about. Sometimes in the Liberty movement we come across blogs or even people who are very much opposed to belief in Creator God, the God of the Bible particularly. And one of the objections that people offer is the requirement in the Old Testament of blood sacrifice of animals.
I remember back, and I'm past this point now, so I'm going to kind of put myself back there. When you read through the Old Testament with a modern mindset, and they talk about blood sacrifices, it's really hard to imagine that these people should be taken seriously, anything other than just some very primitive group that doesn't have a value for life, that they would just sacrifice things. And what's going on here? And the whole idea of Jesus as the Lamb of God and a sacrifice, well, it doesn't make sense to our modern mind, where we're so disconnected with nature and with killing your own animal when you eat it. But there is, I think when you put it in context, it does make sense, because what was happening with those early sacrifices was they were involving God in it, and they were doing the killing in a way that it was not, that it was minimizing bloodlust, because everything had to be done in a sort of a splitting off of a culture that had degenerated. So when Abraham is offering these sacrifices, the blood is being poured out on the ground, and the commandment is always, don't drink the blood. Well, that's because there were people that were doing that, and we know now from those that are involved in satanic ritual abuse that they actually feed on the hormone release and the chemistry of fear that's in that blood if the animal or sacrifice is killed in an inhumane way. So those early sacrifices were actually done in a humane way, and it's kind of like if you've heard about Native American lore, where before taking the life of an animal you thank it for giving itself to you, and that establishes a connection with the life force that is based in gratitude and not in fear. So it sounds abstract and maybe kind of spooky, but it really isn't, because those things affect the blood chemistry, they affect the physiology, they affect the whole mindset of a culture. So, and I haven't even really gotten to explaining about Jesus as the perfect sacrifice and what that's all about, which is taking it to a whole other level. But I'll let Cindy throw in something, because I've gotten quite a few ideas out there.
The way that the sacrifices took place in the Old Testament, we often call it a tithe, but a certain number of their animals that they raised were to be taken to a centralized location every so often, often during the time of a festival, some kind of holy days. And there the animals would be ritually sacrificed, but the meat would be eaten. And most people have heard of kosher butchering. That's the process that Don is referring to, where the animal is killed humanely, the blood is drained and not consumed, and the meat is also handled very carefully to prevent bacteria from growing and spoiling the meat. But they didn't only sacrifice animals. They also brought other things, produce and grains and fruits as a sacrifice, and also oil. And life was considered holy. And that was a big part of the process. It wasn't about killing. It was about yielding life force.
In Exodus 15, I believe it is, where when Abraham made the covenant with God, and this is the covenant in which includes all of the other covenants, so the master covenant, so to speak, and the animals were split, and Abraham and God as the spirit, Abraham fell asleep as his spirit came over him and then walked between the animals. And that was, when we read these things in the Bible, we think, well, that was just one event and it's kind of weird. But actually, that was something that was done as a practice when people were making a covenant and with one another. And what they were saying was, may it be to me as this animal, may I be split in two if I neglect to keep this part of the covenant. So these animals were being sacrificed for a purpose of an agreement between two people. In this case, in Exodus 15, it was only the Spirit of God that walked between the animals, and a deep sleep had fallen on Abraham. And that's because humanity, in the person of Abraham, was not and is not able to fulfill the covenant. It's all God. It's all the work of God's Spirit working within us to bring forth the work of God into the world. And the sacrifices of the animals are the giving up of the life force to make that possible, and the wise use of the resources that God has given us. So it's symbolic, but it's also real tangible, physical animals, flesh and blood. And this, of course, is the fulfillment of what that happened to Jesus on the cross, and that life force that's given for humanity to be reconciled with God, first on an individual basis, then on a corporate, larger basis. So this life force being given and then received by us enables us to move into the goodness that God has planned for us.
Even if you're a vegetarian, other living things have given their lives so that you could draw from their sustenance. And life force is a very significant, I want to say concept, but it's not just a concept, it's a reality. The thing that happens, one of the most evil things that the cabal does, is to draw off our life force. And life force is a kind of a currency, if you could think of like electrical currency. It's or the current of a river. This life force runs through us, and we do things with it. We work, we serve, we laugh, we dance, whatever we do. There's a release of our life force that we are, as people who are created free, intended to use for our own benefit, and for the benefit of our children and our community. But this life force has been drawn off. And
I want to mention now, the counterfeit and the ripping off of the life force. Many times in Christian circles, you're told, you don't want to focus on the negative, but only look on God, and that's true. You want to look at the real thing, not focus on the counterfeit. But because we live in a world that is fallen, that is deeply contaminated by evil, we need to be able to recognize that evil and not just close our eyes to it. And this whole life force concept, and again, it's more than a concept, but it's this principle that underlies life, is seriously abused by the cabal, the satanic orientation of the people that literally do suck on people's life force. And you hear a lot of echoes of that in our culture today. The whole emphasis on vampires and zombies, and you hear the phrase zombie bankers, and there's all a deep meaning to that. It's people that are oriented around pulling life out of something, robbing something, instead of giving thanks and receiving with gratitude what the universe gives to you, so that you can multiply it out and bless. It's a stealing, it's a robbing, and the cabal banking system is inherently evil and flawed, because it is built on an enslavement principle of perpetual debt. And that is why we need to transition to a new banking system. So currency is current. It is life force flowing through people, individuals, communities, and we need to get past this system of enslavement and into a system of liberty and of blessing and of something that flows forth from abundance, because we are connected with an infinite creator and can bless infinitely, and there's no need for perpetual debt and bondage and enslavement.
The way our currency is siphoned off is through interest rates, inflation, and the big one, the IRS. So our life force is turned through the work of our hands and the way our culture rewards work into currency, money, and thereby sucked off away from us because of the prior claims that these institutions have on any money that we make. They have a prior claim, particularly through taxes, but also through interest and inflation. So they've managed to rig the system to draw off our life force, and that ultimately is the thing that we are desiring in this country and in the world, to be set free from that oppression.
Make it real simple. The money in this current debt enslavement system is created out of nothing, but the money to pay the interest on what's created out of nothing is never created. What does that do? That means that it's like a game of musical chairs, where there's always going to be somebody that's left out. There's never going to be enough. It's a system that's designed around lack and a punishment of those who can't get their interest, because it's never created. There will always be victims in this system. This is not a system of God. And no, God is not neutral to the money system that we have. It's not something that he doesn't think about, doesn't care about. He is, I believe, deeply angered, and his cry for justice from his heart is going out and will be answered in our time to change the system. This is the same God as Jesus who threw the money changers out of the temple. This is nothing more than a full-blown manifestation of that same spirit, the world that we're living in today. And it will change before Christ comes again, I believe, because we who are believers are we are a victorious, overcoming bride, and this debt enslavement system will not stand up against a rise of a victorious bride without spot or wrinkle.
Thanks for watching.
So there's a lot out there now that's going on, but you need to think for yourself.